Starting. Who are you and why are you here?
Who are you guys?
Present.
And who am I to you?
I am Gabriel's grandfather.
What's your name?
My name is Don Petrov.
Also known as?
Don't-
The Don Papa.
Papa D.
I guess Papa D.
Alright.
Alrighty.
And then,
And that makes me Grandma Jamie.
yeah. So, we're gonna start off simple. Tell me what my parents were like when they were kids. I guess less about my mom.
Oh, wow. Well, your dad was a chubby little kid. I'm teasing.
Say those things.
I'm teasing. Oh boy, he was adventurous.
Yeah.
Always always enjoyed playing Army. That's what I remember the most. He drove the car when he was 9 years old. He always liked driving and being on tractors and cars, and I don't know. He was also kind of quiet, and he had some goofy tendencies, but
What's a goofy tendency?
Yeah, what were those?
he liked to eat.
Oh.
He liked food, yeah.
He
what
liked
else?
food. He enjoyed eating food. He was a good kid, good sweet kid. Pretty typical. Riding his bikes and playing outside a lot.
Nice. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Describe the first car you ever had. Is that the one that Dad drove?
No. No. Let's see.
Timeline problems with that, huh? Uh-huh.
The first car I ever had? Boy, it was, what was that thing? Well, the first vehicles I drove were my parents' pickup trucks. Ford Rangers. I remember these 70, 71, 72.
Those are big.
Those were the first vehicles, and we had an old GMC 3 on the tree around the farm that we drove.
Yeah.
Later on I had a Camaro. Let's see. But prior to that, there was one other vehicle, and I was not a very good driver. I was actually a horrible driver. But I don't recall the first vehicle.
What does a horrible driver look like?
I wrecked one of the pickups once.
Yeah.
Slid
yeah.
in the winter, slid in the ditch, driving too fast.
Mhm.
I backed into something with we had some family friends, and I don't know why they entrusted me to go to the store. But anyway, backing out of the driveway was a little bit of a challenge, so I think I scraped a tree.
Ooh.
So those were my early experiences with the cars. But,
You know,
it improved after a while.
cars total super easy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when it's that kind of car.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a little tough.
Um,
The winters were rough, and they didn't have all the fancy front wheel drive cars back then, so there was a lot of rear wheel vehicles, and those are tough to handle on the ice and stuff like that. So
yeah.
yeah.
How is school different than today? I don't know if you know much about today.
You want the real answer?
Yeah.
No.
You want the politically correct answer?
Yeah.
No, I want a personal answer.
I want both.
I thought there was much more discipline in schools than there is today. I think, as far as I can recall and what I can attest to from experiencing my kids, and then even now just watching other children, quite a big difference, right?
Yeah.
We were much more disciplined, much more fearful of teachers, and I think, to me, that would be the level of respect that we had would be the biggest difference, I think.
That
From
makes
what I
sense.
can tell, I don't know. We didn't have the expectation, the level of expectation, I think, that
we were going to be allowed to live.
that I see. But
We were going to be allowed
it was
to
a good
survive
thing. I think
experiences.
discipline's a good thing. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest. I think there's still lots of good kids, and good kids then, good kids now. So there's a lot that's probably the same. Some of the dynamics that exist in the schools probably the same. Kids are not that much different, but
Yeah.
anyway.
That makes sense. Tell me how you guys met each other.
We met
And it's just
in
one.
Portland, Oregon. I was running a cab, and Jamie was coming into town for business, and we met in the cab.
Mm-hmm.
That's
He was
how.
my
That's
cab driver.
that was her cab. That's how we met.
He'd been going around bribing all the concierges at the nice buildings downtown at the hotels for rides to call him. And so there was a rainstorm, so I had the concierge call me a cab.
That was
And
it.
this goofball showed up.
That was it.
Nice.
Basically.
Be careful what happens in a thunderstorm, you know.
Yeah. Let's go a little bit younger. Describe your hometown when you were a teenager. We do I don't know, both of yours, maybe.
Well, let's see.
What was your hometown?
Well,
What would you
I
categorize
s-
as your hometown?
I split time a little bit in Cambridge. I grew up in Minnesota, and my mother moved around a lot, so the early years there was a lot of moving around. But then we settled in Cambridge, and then it was just a rural farming community. We had horses, and it was pretty basic, simple life. We didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't have all the fancy stuff. And of course, we had a television and a telephone. And it hung on the wall. Those two items, and then
That's highfalutin.
that's pretty high end there. I did end up.
What would that have been? The late 60s?
No, that was 70s.
Early 70s.
Early 70s. Yeah, and I spent some time in Grand Rapids with my grandparents. Lived in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, so we spent a lot of time up there. And then eventually I moved up there and spent a year or two with my buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And we attended a Nazarene church, and that's where all my friends were at the time. And yeah.
What about yours?
I grew up in Spokane, so my grandmother had a little shop in an old historic flour mill on the
Yeah.
river outside the park. So I grew up with Riverfront Park as my park, playing on the river, hanging out with my grandmother after school and on the weekends. Not too different from what we did when you guys came to visit.
Yeah.
Well, as far as messing around,
the town is different, but you know.
yeah, we used to do a lot of hunting. We did a lot of fishing.
Yeah.
We snowmobiled quite a bit because we had snowmobiles, and I did some trapping, a lot of trapping as a kid back in those days. Just spent a lot of time outdoors. That's
Yeah, it's funny. Even though I grew up downtown Spokane, we spent a lot of time outside. even
riding
there.
bicycles and
Yeah.
just all the kids would be outside, and you would meet up with your friends, and of course, you know, we didn't have phones or iPhones or computers.
How did you know how to find each other? You just
Yeah.
stand on
We
the
just-
rooftop and yell.
we-
Oh!
Well, remember, we had a telephone on the wall.
Oh!
But,
was it a party
um,
line?
Yes, you had the party lines. Yeah, you
Yeah.
could do that.
Yeah.
No, but most of the time we just ride our bike over to somebody's house, and that's how we did it. We just show up, or somebody'd show up at our house,
Sure.
or we'd get off the bus at someone's house, or somebody get off the bus at our place. That's how it all happened.
Wait for the crow to fly by.
Yeah. And if somebody's big brother had a car, then we'd pile in there, if we could.
Nice.
It's
When
not
they got
much
older.
different than
So
when
Yeah, it's not much different, huh?
So that's how that worked. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of it's the same, you know, depending on where you
Yeah,
live.
always got to be suspicious of the kid with an older brother.
Yeah. Was there anything else you guys did for fun when you were younger, or was there not much else besides?
Oh,
I
we-
think Papa Don just told you that part, you know, about being outside and hunting and fishing and.
Spent a lot of time at the cabin with my grandparents, and spent a lot of time at one of my uncles had a farm and a sawmill, and they milked cows. We spent a lot of time there, and that was always fun for me. I really enjoyed that. Otherwise, we would spend a lot of time Minnesota had a lot of outdoor skating rinks, and so we would spend a lot of time on these skating rinks in the winters, and so
Practicing the hockey moves.
you know, you had the 4 seasons, and of course activities would change depending on the season. So
Yeah.
Nice.
we spent a lot of time, like I said, outside. It was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun as a kid.
What about life in America in general compared to now? So that'd be
That experience will depend on your upbringing, where you were raised, and the environment in which you
Yeah.
came from, whether you were a rural kid or a city kid.
We're talking about yours.
Experience. So in my case, you know, I grew up in a rural area, so I was really kind of out of my element in the big cities. So they were always new and scary, and even the visual aspect of that was different. So people, you know, so I was a little not sheltered. We just grew up in a rural setting, so it was different, you know.
yeah.
I don't know what the difference is between, you know, from then and now. You know, it's probably a lot of differences. I don't know.
Well, comparing to Spokane, the Spokane that I knew to the Spokane that's there now, there's obviously a lot of, there's a lot more people kind of in the wind. A
Yeah.
lot more homeless people. Seems like there's more people who are drug addicted than there used to be.
Oh, well.
Not that there wasn't always before. There was some, you know, I grew up in Spokane in the 70s. There was a little population of people, religious cultists living in the park wearing, you know, robes and doing transcendental meditation in the 70s, living unhoused. But the unhoused now seem to have more problems.
Makes sense.
Again, depend on the city, I think, because you know, 60s, coming out of the 60s, there was a lot of stuff happening in like California and different cities. So
I'm just talking about the city that I'm familiar with
Yeah.
from my memories when I was young versus my memories of that same place today.
yeah,
It is different.
yeah, different. Everything's different. Different everywhere.
What is your What's some of your guys'? This was kind of vague, but what's some of your guys' strongest memories from growing up? Like, I don't know how much you want to do, but I know it's kind of vague.
Just whatever first thing that comes to mind when you ask
Yeah.
that question.
Well, for me, the fondest memories are
That's a good one.
some of the fondest memories were just spending time with my cousins and friends around the neighborhood and just engaging in all those things that I described earlier. Those are probably the memories. We lived in Germany a couple years, so that was kind of interesting. When I was 9 and 10. Those stick out. Those stand out. There was other things. There's lots of other. The circus was kind of neat because when I was a kid, the old Barnum and Bailey circus still had the tent, and they would set up in tents, and they still had lions and elephants and all sorts of stuff, and eventually that kind of went away, but I got that as a kid, so that was fun. Those things I remember. I got to witness Evel Knievel jumping at.
Do you know who Evel Knievel is?
Not exactly.
Oh,
You want to explain to him what Evel Knievel
he was a daredevil, motorcycle daredevil. He jumped the Grand Canyon later, and
He would jump his
motorcycle, yeah,
And
over
he would do
bust
it, like,
long,
over cars, like how many cars
He
could
did.
he jump it over?
He did Caesar's Palace. Look him up on YouTube.
I'll do that.
There you go.
Broke every bone in his body,
That's
apparently.
that's a different
Wow.
historical event.
Yeah,
we could
look
talk
him
about.
up.
There
Yeah,
you
you
go.
might you find that interesting.
Or
Don't
maybe
try
you
it
shouldn't.
though.
You saw him?
You shouldn't
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, I seen him in Minnesota.
Don't get any ideas. You shouldn't. do it. No, thank you.
Yeah, so those are
What
some
are
memories.
You leading this
you know.
child towards?
Those are some. Yeah, don't try it. No, but those things were pretty big deals back in those days. So
What was the question?
That was just memory. Any memory.
those are the memories. So some of the memories. There's probably a lot of memories.
You got any, Grandma Jamie? Maybe from Spokane? I don't know.
Well, I wanted to hear the full question that you were asking again.
That was, it's very vague,
Yes.
but describe one of your strongest memories from growing up.
Mm.
So I guess like the one that you'd remember the most.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I had one, but now I've lost it. I remember once one of the memories I always have that is the memory of learning that I knew something that I didn't know I should know. So I was walking with my mom once, and I knew a word. And when I think back on that memory, I think, how did I know that word at that age? So sometimes that memory always comes to mind when anybody asks me about a memory, because I can remember it so clearly, like the sidewalk and the grass and the air and where we were,
What
like
was the word?
with the round houses. The word was exclamation,
Oh.
and I was probably 4 or 5. Because we were walking with my cousin who was a baby, and I knew what an exclamation point was. But I didn't know how to write or knew what a sentence was, so how would I know what an exclamation point was? I've always been confused by that memory. But everything about it is so clear. The grass, and I even drive by that place every once in a while because it was between my grandmother's house and the old Gonzaga Law School. And so it was just this one block, and I remember this block, but it doesn't look anything like that when I drive by it now, so it could have all just been a dream. Memories are kind of like that.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what age too. So there's a lot of memories from different,
Memories are
age.
weird.
Well, I have memories from the service. I have memories from.
We can get into the service later if you want.
Oh, we're moving through it.
If you're-
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. No. Next question.
I mean, I'm just saying, if you want to get into more detail, I got questions for that.
You want to talk about your service, then we're there.
Oh.
I know this one's a good one. for you especially, what are some of your favorite bands, the first records that you guys own?
Oh yeah, Papa D's favorite bands.
For me, some of the first records
Yeah.
Mhm.
would be the Beatles.
Mm.
Would be some of the very first records.
Yeah.
I had a portable 45 record player. I had a portable record player, a suitcase record player. And I played 45s on it. I think some of the ones that I remember the most were some Beatles and I didn't have access to a lot of records, so I don't.
Where did you get your records in Grand
You
Rapids?
know, I scrounge one up here and there when I could get them.
Yeah.
And I don't recall now how I acquired them, but I was young. I was, 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
12.
I think the first
13.
record that I picked out was at the grocery store, and I was probably around 6th grade, 12.
Yeah.
And it was Billy Joel.
Oh.
Yeah. Still a fan of the Billy Joel.
I had some country western. I don't even remember who they all were. The Beatles stand out.
Sure.
But that changed.
What era
was
of
lots
Beatles? Like, what was the
Fif-
first era of Beatles that
Six-
you got really into?
Well, so the Beatles were very short-lived, really. They broke up very quickly. Even in my youth, they were gone already.
So what was your Beatles
So early
entry point?
'60s.
What was your entry point to the Beatles? Or maybe you've just been listening to it on the
So
radio.
about
as your childhood.
60, probably in 69, 60. No, it'd have to be 70, 71, 72.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that period from 60, 61, all the way up to 70. So I forget what year they actually broke up, but there was, 10, 12 years there of
Mm-hmm.
music. So they'd already, by the
So
time
you're
I
right.
remember them, I think they'd already broke
They'd
up.
already done all of it.
They'd already broke up, I think. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think.
So you grew up with all of it. You grew up, it was probably saturated in your
I grew up with
psyche in your
all of it.
diaper years.
Yeah.
Because your mom was a rock and roller.
No.
No?
No, I don't think so. I think
Not like the Beatles and No?
not that I know of. Not that I ever knew of. No. She's coming out of the
Northern Minnesota.
50s, 40s, 50s.
Oh,
I don't
delayed
know.
reaction. No internet, so stuff
sure.
didn't move out as fast.
No, I don't ever remember parents listening to the Beatles.
Mm.
That was me as a kid, 11, 12.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't know what they did. Of course, that progressed into lots of other bands that, lots. Even during that time period, there were many, many, many bands that were coming up.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Lots of that, but it came later when you're talking teenager. 15, 16, 17, then things are different. Then now you're getting into psychedelic rock or, late 60s, early 70s stuff. And so changed lots of stuff. Mid 60s to early 70s. All sorts of music.
Yeah. Was that your favorite band?
The Beatles,
Or do you have another one? Yeah.
favorites.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That was like your first record. What did you actually listen to?
I would say they're probably something I would categorize as one of my favorites, probably. There's so many because I like music a lot, so there were so many different, and all sorts of different genres. Not the
Ask him what his current favorite is.
Oh yeah, what is your current favorite?
current favorite. What would it be?
The current favorite is the Yacht Rock station.
Oh, but that so
on the satellite, so-
so that station plays a lot of mid 70s to
Yacht Rock.
probably
Good
81.
stuff.
Yeah, there's a category there. I don't know if they're favorites, but they're definitely there was a time period where music kind of sucked in a way for me because I wasn't into that stuff as much. Now I reflect on it now and I listen to it, but that stuff was all over the radio and all the other stuff had kind of gone away. And then it wasn't until the early 80s when you started to list bands were
Music is a journey.
mid 80s. Yeah, there was, and I never got into I wasn't into the hair bands. This is the whole thing. There's a whole genre and then the obscure, whatever that was back then. I had no idea. Grunge and all that stuff that showed up in the 90s. Don't know. Kind of phased through all that stuff, and some of it I like, some of it. But I listen to music even today, so nothing's changed. I liked a lot of it, a lot more of it then probably than now. I mean, I don't take in as much as I did then.
Yeah.
Now, but I did a lot. Like
You still do though. You still, some people
I take in a
stop
lot.
listening
I guess
to
I
new
take-
music, but
I
you
take
still
in a
chase
lot.
it a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate the new. I take in. I appreciate all of it really.
It's
The
all in a
R&B.
soothing melodic kind of music.
There's a lot, yeah, and all across the genres too. Yeah.
We kind of went over the house and the city, or I don't know. We didn't really hear much about yours. Heard a little bit about Spokane.
House.
Yeah, like more about your house and your city instead of just the time period. If that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Mm-mm.
Like instead of then and now, just describe the actual, your home.
Is it a question of what her house is like when you were a kid? What kind of houses
No,
did
like what
you
was
live
yours
in?
like?
My house
Yeah.
first, like a house that I purchased.
Well, you said you moved around, so I guess whichever one you want.
Pick a house you want to tell them about. What house stands out?
Moved around a little bit.
What house stands out in your childhood as
Oh well.
Maybe
a house
the-
that you like?
And the city too.
Oh. Well, I gotta tell you, moving on from Cambridge and Grand Rapids, I really, really enjoyed Portland for a while. Starting in about 1980, 81, 82, somewhere in there. Portland was nice.
Yeah.
I liked San Diego. I enjoyed, spending a little time down there. Never got to the East Coast. That's a regret. I wish I would have gone out there. But no, I guess Portland stands out because it was really a neat place back in those days.
Yeah.
And so I think ever since then I've been out here. We've been in the Northwest since then. So a couple of years in Florida, which I really enjoyed Florida. But that came later. But early on, just, after Cambridge and Grand Rapids and some of the Minnesota, and it was Service and then it was Portland. So I'd have to say Portland.
Do you
All
wanna-
right. Can I tell you we have probably 2 more questions? Can we have 2 more questions?
Sure.
Is
How
that going to
about-
be enough for your interview process?
Yeah. So, how about we go? I don't know. There are some fun ones here. We could do military service, the first job, and
My-
we could do
my-
something like
My
what
first
things
job
cost.
was working for the city. So my first official job, as a kid, I worked a lot of jobs because in those days, as a kid, you could work in the fields. You could work. You could do things. I understand that's different now, but my first official job was, I think I was 16, and I worked for the city of Cambridge on a program they called CETA. And I earned $2.10 an hour, and my job was to clean the sewer. They thought this was funny, so they would take us. As a young guy, they introduced me to all sorts of stuff. Whatever these guys were doing, this was their job. These were older guys.
Who's Life Skills Camp?
And they had to maintain city operations and different things, parks, mowing and all sorts of city function. That's what I was subjected to. So that would have been my first job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Riding around with those guys, it was really fun. It was kind of intimidating. At that time, you're dealing with guys that came out of World War II and Vietnam and stuff. So they were interesting characters back then. I was a kid, so it was all, it's very interesting to me, I guess, some level. But yeah, that was my first job. My first official job.
Last two questions. We do talking about service, if you want, and then get a little bit into Mount St. Helens. You mentioned you saw it. That's a little bit interesting.
Mount St. Helens?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Service first. Still doing your background, setting up your
yeah.
expert witness veracity.
I spent a few years in the Navy and stationed in San Diego. Did a lot of traveling. I was stationed on the West Coast, and so I saw a lot of Asian countries. Put it that way. No conflict, just sailing around the ocean. No, that's basically it. There's lots to talk about, but we don't have enough time. But
You can do another interview
we can
anytime.
do that.
Want to get into Mount St. Helens real quick before we go?
Mount St. Helens, the historic event.
Where were you when?
Where were you when Mount St. Helens
Yeah.
blew?
Well, I was living in North Portland at the time. I was 20-something. And it was, I think that, and that morning, I was working that morning, and I worked in a restaurant. And I remember just stepping out the door, and there it was. It had gone off, and it was billowing. For us, it was nice because the winds at that time everything was blowing sort of northeast, and so we were experiencing ash, and it's 50 miles from Portland, so it looked like it was right over the top of us. It looked like it was right here.
Yeah.
It was so tall and so massive and just so.
So you could see the plume.
It was
It
so
like the
unbelievable.
plume.
You could see fire, and you could see the plume. You could see the darkness. The whole thing was. You could see all the movement, and that's what stood out the most. The violence and
scared?
everything that took
How many,
place.
what was your feeling? What
No,
would you
from our
identify as the
perspective,
feeling?
there was no fear because all the violence took place in another direction. It went northeast.
Yeah.
So all we were experiencing was a beautiful picture. It was a beautiful blue sky day.
In fact, you've seen the pictures.
It was a blue sky day, and the contrast of that was pretty amazing. So you're just from the Portland standpoint until it started snowing ash and until it really got to swirling around. But that initial visual effect was you'll never forget it. But yes, it was not a friendly event. But from the perspective from Portland, I don't know if scary is the word, because none of the flooding and all the massive things that took place over the
Super localized.
ensuing days,
Yeah.
that caused a lot of trouble. But that initial morning, the first couple hours, just seemed surreal. It wasn't scary. Now there was a lot of activity in another direction, and a lot of violence and stuff that took place on the other side of the mountain that you couldn't see from the Portland vantage point.
Yeah.
But it was right there. I mean, it was like right over your head. That's how. Even though it was 50 miles away, it just looked like it was right over your head. It was just pretty massive. It was pretty impressive. And then it got, chaotic, days later. But it was, yeah, so her experience here had to be a lot different in Spokane.
Yeah, Spokane was a lot different.
Did
So
you,
it's 300 miles to the west.
Did you see it as well?
We didn't see the eruption, but we got all the ash.
Ah.
So all that stuff that was pluming up was this really fine ash. And I was driving with my brother in a pickup truck. We were gonna go wash windows on a second story, floor. And it was like, it got nighttime. And it was like 9 o'clock in the morning or whatever. What time did it blow up?
Yeah, 9 o'clock. It was,
It was like,
I think it started before that, but I don't know the actual eruption. I don't know the exact time, but it started before that.
and we
Before
knew,
9
so we
o'clock.
had known there was rumblings, right? There were evacuations. They knew it was going to blow
Yeah.
up. So we'd heard about it on the news. But so we're driving around to go wash windows during the day, and it gets nighttime dark, and all this ash is falling. So we had to go home because the radios, all the emergency broadcast systems are all going off and telling you to go home and shelter in place. And we ended up being out of school for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Was the first time I'd ever seen masks outside of a hospital. You know how masks that we wear now fairly routinely. We had to get those because she couldn't breathe. The ash was super fine, and they thought it was going to cause it was causing respiratory distress, and they didn't know how much was going to come or how long it was going to last.
It was a lot of
And
unknowns.
it was really heavy, you couldn't really snow plow it. The snow plows wouldn't work with it. You couldn't really, super slippery to drive on. It was wild.
It caused some trouble, and
It was like that for a couple
Yeah.
of days, which, as a kid felt like weeks.
there had been a lot of seismic activity for a week or 2 weeks or a month before it actually went up. So
Yeah.
when it did go up, that's what got us out of the restaurant because you could feel it. We were so close, so it was almost like an earthquake. And then of course you run outside, and by then it's starting. So
Yeah.
we caught it really early, and you could watch that progression. So there wasn't a lot of fear to begin with, but then it got kind of chaotic after that. After day, 2 day, 3rd day, 4th day, all the flooding, you started hearing news reports and all the folks that got caught in it and all the other details that go along with it. But I have 2 original VHS tapes of the whole event. So
Wait,
if you want to watch them,
I would like to save those.
I'll have to get them to you because you'll see it. It's pretty massive. Yeah.
I'll look for those.
Yeah.
I bet there's some in Graham's stuff. Too.
Yeah, because they
I'll have Mom
videotape.
if she finds some.
There's lots of footage on that thing
Yeah.
going up. So
And
it's
you used to be able to buy little vials of, you could I survived Mount St. Helens with little bits
You
of
could buy ash.
volcanic
Yeah.
ash.
people
It
made
makes really
money on
nice
that.
glass art.
Yeah.
Makes it really pretty.
Can you imagine
You can probably
today?
still get them at gift
Can you
shops
imagine
in
today
Spokane.
with the internet and the eBay and everything? What
Oh, yeah, you could probably buy them.
how much how that would have been back then? If we'd have had the technology
We could
then,
have all been millionaires.
there'd have been. If you'd have been the first one to get those that took advantage of that, even in those days, that could.
Oh yeah, I think we
They
sold them
advertised
at
in the
toy
back of
shop.
magazines like Popular Mechanic. You get these magazines ads. This is what we used to do as kids because we didn't have all this. So you'd look in the back of magazines
Yeah.
and they would have ads. It could be for stamps or this or that, cartoons and this. So yeah, that was fun. Yeah,
I'm sure $4.95 your very own vial.
So all
Mount
the-
St. Helens ash.
Yes, and Oregon and Washington were big tourist states, and so all the tourist shops began to sell vials of.
We'll look and
Ash.
when my mom we'll see if
Yeah,
mom
yeah.
has any from Graham.
Yeah, you think they're still around?
There
So that
was
was
just a
interesting.
few things that my grandmother really had an attraction for. One, historic memorabilia of things she lived
Yeah,
through.
yeah.
So Kennedy, Mount St. Helens, the O.J.
It was quite an
Simpson
event. It was quite an event. I'll give you I'll let you watch. I'll
We'll find you the video.
find you the videos. I got them at home. I think I got 2 of them.
Yeah.
They're cool.
All right. I'm gonna end this now.
Do you have a VHS?
Thank
player?
you.
But
It's super fun.
yeah,